Good evening, everyone. Today's topic is scaffold for tissue engineering. We have already understood scaffolds are the temporary or artificial extracellular matrices whose job is to accommodate cells and support the formation of the three-dimensional structure of a tissue. Why we need scaffolds? The need for scaffold arose when replacement of the tissue was now taken up by regeneration of the tissue in order to make sure that the original state or the function of the tissue is maintained, right? Before we see how the scaffolds are made or what their function is, we need to understand what an ideal scaffold should look like or should function like in case of application in tissue engineering. So here is a list of properties that an ideal scaffold should fulfill. First of all, it should act as a template for tissue growth in three-dimensional mode. Then it should have enough macroporous network which will help in vascularization, tissue ingrowth and nutrient delivery. It should be porous in nature overall. Third, it should also be able to bond to the host tissue without formation of any scar, which is usually seen during the repair process. So we have to make sure that the type of scaffold that you are taking and implanting in the body, it should be able to bond with the natural tissue. Second, it should be resorbed, that is, it should be able to degrade at a rate in such a way that when the normal tissue is being formed, it should be slowly able to replace the scaffold. Then it should also have the ability or properties to influence the cells which are being seeded in the scaffold, because only when the cells or the genes of the cells are influenced, the cells will be able to properly differentiate and proliferate to form the complete tissue. And the process of production of those scaffolds should be easy and should be cheap. Finally, the whatever you are constructing should have all the mechanical properties similar to that of the host. So these are some of the important properties of an ideal scaffold. Very important 2-mark question. This table gives you the comparison between the functions of an extracellular matrix in native tissue and that of a scaffold in an tissue engineered product. Please go through it. This will give you a clear idea. We have already understood this part, but this is another important 2-mark question which you need to remember so that you will understand the difference or how the scaffold functions as an extracellular matrix. For any scaffold material to function as a scaffold or any biomaterial to function as a scaffold, these are the 3 important properties which are must. That is, it should be bio-inert. It should not have any chemical response with the body. It should be bio-resorbable. That is, it should be able to degrade at a specific rate. And it should be bioactive. That is, it should produce biological response from the body that will help in proper differentiation, proliferation and differentiation of the cell for the formation of the complete tissue. Here are the 4 important approaches that are being used for scaffolding in tissue engineering. The first method is where we use a pre-made porous material where you just have to seed the cells which will grow into, which will proliferate and differentiate into specific tissue. The second approach is where you take a natural tissue and remove all the cells present in them and you get the extracellular matrix alone, which can be used for your experiment as a natural biomaterial, where you can seed the desired cell and prepare the desired tissue. The third approach is where the cell sheets are used and these cells have the ability to synthesize extracellular matrix, where the cells you don't have to seed any cell because already the cells are present. These sheets can then be arranged into layers to form a complete tissue. And finally, the fourth approach is to encapsulate the cells in the biomaterial, which can be assembled into a specific scaffold structure and can be used as a tissue engineered product. Hence, in this case also, the cell seeding is done along with the biomaterial in the beginning itself, which is a hydrogel material which can be assembled into the desired tissue structure, right? So here are the various processing methods of polymers which are used for formation of a porous scaffold. The first method is a phase separation method. Phase separation is the most commonly used method. The problem here is usually the pore size is very small and the size cannot be controlled. Uniform pore size cannot be obtained. The second method is fiber bonding method, which is also a very common method, but then here the mechanical strength of the bond is not very good. The third method is porogen leaching or salt leaching. The disadvantage of this method is the pores which are formed, they are usually clogged or blocked, so that does not help the seeding of the cells. And the other three methods are freeze drying, application of high pressure CO2 and rapid prototyping or solid freeform fabrication. The solid prototyping or solid freeform fabrication is a very advanced technique which is being now applied in many advanced tissue engineering applications. The best advantage here is that we can obtain a uniform pore size of the desired size that we want for our specific application. So here is a table which gives you the different cells, different tissues and the desired pore size, that is optimal pore size that is required for formation of the complete tissue in vitro. So for example, if you want to prepare a skin scaffold for preparation of a skin, the pore size should be 10 to 100 or 20 to 125. Similarly, for a bone, the scaffold with pore size 100 to 350 is best suited. Like that, these are the different pore sizes required. So let us see the different methods that are being applied for formation of scaffolds, porous scaffolds. The first one is phase separation, which is called as TIPS or thermally induced phase separation technique. In this method, the pore size are usually very small and they are not uniform. You can either use the two steps in this method are solvent crystallization and polymer precipitation. The two methods, in fact. The first method is solvent crystallization. In this you can see PLGA solution is taken in a solvent, and when the PLGA melts in the solvent at around 45 degrees, it is then poured into a cast and allowed to freeze at minus 18 degrees Celsius. On freezing, you will see the solvent forms crystals and PLGA forms a separate layer. After this, under vacuum, when you dry this entire solid which is formed, the crystals of the solvent are totally removed, leaving behind only the PLGA, and wherever the solvent crystals were present, there you will find voids. Void is nothing but gaps. So you can see we have prepared a scaffold of this particular shape, wherein the PLGA has formed the scaffold, and wherever the solvent crystals were present, now because of vacuum drying, they have been removed, leaving behind holes. So you can see now we have formed a scaffold which is porous in nature. As I have already told you, this does not help in formation of uniform pore size. So each pore is of a different dimension, but very small pores are formed because the crystal sizes were very small. So this method is called as TIPS or thermally induced phase separation method. So you can see different scaffolds made using TIPS method. Each one has a different concentration of PLGA and different type of solvent has been used, right? So this method has certain advantages and disadvantages. Advantage is that it is highly porous in nature and easy to make. Disadvantage is that the solvent residues, even though while vacuum drying we are removing all the solvent, but still traces of solvent are left behind which can interfere with the cell's development or the tissue development. Then the next method is fiber bonding method. Fiber bonding method, you can see, is a very interesting method. In this, a non-bonded fiber structure of polymer A is taken, and this polymer A is then immersed into a polymer B solution which is in the solution form. So fiber of polymer A is immersed in a solution of polymer B and they are allowed to set. After that, this polymer B which was present in a please understand, whenever I am saying polymer solution, always remember the polymer is made into a solution in a solvent. So the solvent along with polymer B is present in the solution form, in which polymer A in the fiber form you are immersing inside. When you immerse this polymer A in a solvent containing polymer B, there will be interaction between polymer A and polymer B. They will interact with each other and they will combine. When the evaporation takes place, all the solvent will go out, will evaporate, leaving behind the combined polymer A and polymer B. This polymer A and polymer B, when it is heated again, further bonding takes place that leads to formation of a web-like structure or a net-like structure. Later on, whatever unbound polymer is there, that is removed through dissolution. By dissolving all the unbound polymer, what is left out is like a sheet-like structure where polymer A and polymer B have bound together, leading to formation of a scaffold which is porous and which is like a sheet-like structure. These are the structures which are used for formation of an artificial skin. So this method is called as fiber bonding technique. Again, it has certain advantages and disadvantages. This one is also highly porous and interconnected fiber-like structure. It has a very large surface area and better mechanical strength. The disadvantage is, as I have already told you, fiber bonding does not have very good load bearing strength. So we can use it for thin tissue but cannot be used for scaffold. This kind of scaffold preparation method cannot be used for tissues like bone or cartilage. Okay, then the next method is solvent casting and particulate leaching technique, SCPL technique, or solvent casting and particulate leaching technique. Now it's a very simple method. We take a polymer solution in a Petri plate, in a cast. This is here Petri plate is working as a cast. So we have taken a polymer solution in a Petri plate. To this polymer solution we are adding salt and we allow both to interact. After some time, what happens is the salt will go and settle in between the polymer solution. After that, again, I am repeating again, whenever I say polymer solution, we are talking about polymer in a solvent solution. So when this solvent is allowed to evaporate, what happens is there will be a mesh-like structure, right? There will be a mesh-like structure, and in the water, what happens to salt when salt comes in contact with water? We have already understood salt, when it comes in contact with water, it will dissolve completely. So wherever the salt particles were present within the polymer solution, after the solvent evaporates and when this structure is immersed into water, wherever salt particles were present, the salt will dissolve in the water, leaving behind hole-like structures in the polymer, which gives a porous mesh-like structure. This method is called as leaching, salt leaching. This method is called as salt leaching. You can see here how the porogen leaching method or a salt leaching method creates the scaffold. The polymer has square structure. What are those square structure? All those square structures are the positions where the salt particles were present. When this material was immersed in water, the salt particles will dissolve because salt dissolves in water, leaving behind only the empty spaces where the salt was present. As I have told you, the disadvantage is the holes are usually blocked because salt, even though salt is left out, there is a possibility from behind the polymer might be present. So that leads to blocking of the pores present in this kind of scaffold, right? Then the next method is application of high pressure CO2, which is called as supercritical CO2. Now in this method you can see This we have a polymer which is incorporated or which is taken along with clay. Okay, and this clay and polymer, when it is mixed together with another protein, it leads to intercalation of the polymer with the clay molecules. And when this is exposed to supercritical CO2, when this structure is exposed to supercritical CO2, it lead to bonding of the clay particles along with the polymer. And then when the pressure is released, there will be breaking down of all the clay molecules, leaving behind only the structure of the crystal, or not the crystal actually, a structure of the polymer here and there bound with clay particles when it was exposed to high CO2. And because the clay molecule are broken now, the structure expands. You can imagine initially it is stuck together, but when the clay is broken into small pieces, it will expand, leading to formation of pore-like structures in between. Those pore-like structures can then be cooled to form fix in that structure. Before that it was a loose formation. To fix them at that particular porous structure, you have to cool and crystallize it. In the crystallized state, you can see big pores will be there, and surrounding that your clay bound with the polymer will be present, leading to formation of a porous crystalline structure. Right? So that was about application of supercritical CO2. Then the next method is rapid prototyping or solid free from fabrication. In this, there are different techniques that are being used. For example, inkjet printing, stereolithography, solid free from fabrication, or selective laser sintering. In all these cases, we use a specific image or the picture. Image is nothing but a picture which will define the type of structure I want for my scaffold. This image or a CT scan picture is then fed as a CAD file into the system, which will give the instructions to the instrument like the stereolithography, which will print the structure in the desired format. You can see rapid prototype machine, it is almost like your 3D printing machine, which will print the structure of the scaffold with the material that you have given. Any polymeric material that you want is fed in, and the image that you want, the structure or the pore size that you want, all that is fed as a CAD file into the system. Based on the image, the printing is carried out. It is almost like your normal printing. Here, instead of one dimension, the printing is done in a 3 dimension, giving rise to nanoscale structures with the desired pore size. You can see how uniform and neat the structure is. So this is what is called as rapid prototyping or solid free from fabrication. The advantages is, as I have told you, the network is very defined. Pore size can be controlled and tailored, and the whatever size you want, that gradient, it is not necessary it has to be only one single size. In our tissue, in certain places you might need big size pore, in certain places for another type of cell you might need small size pore, so that kind of gradient can also be obtained. Disadvantages: is not very good in most of the cases, and all types of material cannot be used in this technique yet, because only certain polymers have been tested and used in 3D printing, and obviously the entire technique is very expensive, so layman or a normal people cannot afford it. Here are some of the examples of polymeric material that have been used to prepare scaffolds with different types of structures and pore size. Then comes electrospinning. Electrospinning is a very interesting technique which is similar to our how we make murk. How we make murk? We have a small nozzle through which the batter is pressed, and depending on the size of the nozzle and the pressure with which you are up pushing the batter into through the nozzle, different shapes and different sizes are formed. Similarly, here in electrospinning also, you can make very small size thin fibers, which are then plated on a sheet in the desired shape. You can see here at the bottom there is something like in Holi. I don't know how many of you have seen in Holi. We in north you can see they use a small gun-like structure which is called pichkari. Through the pichkari, when they pour this colored water and when they press, it comes out like a jet, right? Same kind of an instrument is used here, like a syringe and a needle. In the syringe, we will have the polymeric solution, and at a very high speed the entire syringe is rotating, and under magnetic force, when the solution is sprayed from the syringe, you can see because of the rotation of the syringe, the jet, which is the thin fiber like structure which is coming out of the needle, will form a coil like structure which can be collected on a collecting plate, and while collecting it will arrange in a mesh like structure like your jalebi. I'll just show you like this. Depending on the speed with which it is rotating and depending on the pressure with which you are pressing the solution out of the needle, you will get different mesh sizes. First picture shows you a non-aligned structure like a jalebi, and the second one shows you neatly aligned structure, right? So this method is called as electrospinning method. Then comes freeze drying method. Freeze drying, as you know, we use very low temperature, or vacuum drying can be used in such a way that all the solution is totally frozen, and then when it is removed, it will leave behind pores within the polymer. So that method is called as freeze drying of porous collagen, right? So you can see here how the structures will look like. Again, here the pore size is not going to be uniform, and different pore sizes. You can combine freeze drying with salt leaching to get bigger sized pores. So these are the different tissues that have been prepared using these techniques. This gives you the characteristics of different scaffolding approaches in tissue engineering. Different materials that can be used, we have already studied the different biomaterials that can be used. Polymers can be used. This you have already studied the different types of biomaterials, so I am not going to repeat it. This you can just go through it. This is for your information. Applications of various porous solid state scaffold: bone tissue engineering, blood vessels, skin, cartilage, ligament, etc. These are some of the popular scaffolds: polyglycolic acid or PGA, then PLA and collagen, and what are the properties they have. Ceramics can be used, for example, in bone and teeth. Ceramic scaffolds can be used. Best example is hydroxyapatite. Then bioactive glasses is also an example of a ceramic that is known to be used in various types of soft tissue as well as hard tissue scaffold formation, right? Then soft gel, sol gel bioactive glasses can also be used for formation of a soft tissue. Then composites can also be used. Composite is basically a combination of different types of polymers and ceramic. So here you can see bone is basically a composite structure, and in that when collagen is used along with certain ceramic material like collagen is basically a polymer, and along with ceramic material, when you combine, that gives two different types of material combination and gives us totally different structure as shown here. So here is a commercially available composite Hapex, which is being used nowadays for many tissue engineering applications. So with that, we have understood what is an ideal scaffold and what are the different methods or techniques which can be used for preparation of scaffold depending on different applications. Thank you.